Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the conflict in the Middle East affecting the international maritime trade, especially in the shipping in the global, from the companies such as Hapag-Lloyd. To understand the magnitude of this problem, we first need to understand the problem, how important the maritime trade is for the global economic around the 80s to 90% of the world. Trade moves by sea. Almost everything we use in the daily life, electronics, clothes, food products, cars, and machinery, and even medical supplies, has probably traveled in a container ship at some point. Because of what when one of the world's major maritime routes becomes unstable, the impact immediate and global. Currently, one of the most strategic trade routes in the world is the Red Sea in the Suez Channel. The route connects Asia with Europe and allows ships to move goods faster than going around the African continent. Normally, the vessels traveling from China, Singapore, or India to Europe cross the Indian Ocean, pass through the Red Sea, then through to the Suez Channel, and finally arrive in the Mediterranean ports. This route is so many special because it reduces both time and the transportation cost. In fact, nearly the 12% of the global trade passes through in the Suez Channel every year. However, because of the current conflicts in the Middle East and attacks against the commercial vessels in the Red Sea, many shipping companies began to consider the route unsafe. As a consequence, the major shipping companies such as Hapag-Lloyd and Maersk temporarily suspended or reduced the operation in the area. And the decision is completely changing for the international logistics in the operations. Instead of crossing the Red Sea, many ships are now forced to sail around Africa through the Cape of the Good Hope, located at the southern tip of the continent. At first, this might not sound extremely serious, but really the consequences are enormous. For example, the routes become much longer. A voyage that previously took around the 30 days may now take 40 or 45 depending on the weather conditions and the port congestion. That means companies spend much more money on fuel combustion, ships operations, and crew management, and the insurance costs. At the same time, the ports begin to suffer the congestion because the schedules become unpredictable. Containers arrive later than expected, and many companies cannot receive their products all the time. When the maritime transport shuts down, the effects spread across the entire global economy. For example, the suppliers that export products to Europe or other international markets face delays fulfilling contracts. Some companies may even lose customers because goods arrive too late. The freight forwarders become extremely important in this case. The freight forwarders are logistic intermediaries that coordinate international shipments between exporters, importers, port, and shipping companies. During a crisis like this, the freight forwarders have to reorganize this route, search for available container space, negotiate prices with shipping companies, and constantly communicate with the customers. And this is where this logistic international negotiation becomes essential, because in the normal situation, the transporting cargo may simply be an operational process. But During the geopolitical conflicts, the logistics becomes a strategic challenge. The companies most negative will assume the additional cost in the transportation. They must renegotiate delivery deadlines. They must discuss insurance, the responsibilities, and they must manage the uncertainty for the real time. For example, imagine a European company waiting for electronic products from Asia. If the cargo arrives in 2 weeks late, the company could lose sales, delay production, or even stop the operations temporarily. So the problem is not the only maritime transportation itself. The problem is that the global supply chains are highly interconnected. Another important consequence is the increase in the freight rates because voyages are not longer and the operational risks are higher. Shipping companies increase the transportation prices, insurance companies also raise the premiums for the vessels operating in the near conflicts. As a result, the international trade becomes more expensive, and eventually consumers around the world may also feel the impact through higher prices in the products such as electronics, vehicles, foods, or industrial materials. These situations almost demonstrate how geopolitical conflicts directly affect the globalization. For many years, the company designed the supply chain based in the speed and efficiency, but current these conflicts show that the security and the routes diversification are now becoming the equal important. In response to this challenge, the companies like Hapag-Lloyd have forced to adapt that quickly. The company has had to redesign routes, monitor security risks, constantly increase the operational flexibility, and maintain the communication with the international customers. At the same time, the shipping companies must balance two priorities. One, protecting crews and maintaining in commercial operation, and that's not easy. Stopping the operations completely creates economic losses, but continuing to operate in dangerous areas may expose vessels and workers to serious risk. So, what we are seeing today is not global conflict, it's a global trade disruption with international consequences. In conclusion, the conflict in the Middle has demonstrated how vulnerable international maritime trade can be stable in the strategic routes become unstable. The Red Sea crisis has increased transportation costs, delayed deliveries affected supply chains, and forced shipping companies like Hapag-Lloyd to make major operational change. And beyond the ships themselves, the situation highlights the importance of the logistics and the commercial negotiation, the risk management, and the international cooperation in the maintaining in global trade stability for the customers, for the company, and for all the people for this topic. So, thank you so much.
And this situation creates another major challenge for international trade uncertainty. Because normally global logistics work with very strict planning. Shipping companies organize schedules months in advance, ports prepare container arrivals ahead of time, importers coordinate warehouse space, and exporters calculate exact delivery dates for clients. But during a geopolitical crisis, all of that becomes unpredictable. Companies suddenly have to deal with route changes, delays, security risk, port congestion, and unexpected operational costs almost every week. And in international trade, uncertainty is extremely expensive. For example, imagine an European company waiting for electronic components from Asia to continue production in a factory. If those components arrive 2 or 3 weeks late because ships have to avoid the Red Sea, the entire production chain can slow down or even stop temporarily. That means factory lose productivity, companies lose money, and workers may also be affected. So the consequences go far beyond maritime transportation itself. Another important effect is inventory management. Before these conflicts, many companies worked with systems designed to minimize storage cost, meaning products arrive at most exactly when needed. But now, because shipping schedules are less reliable, many businesses are forced to store extra inventory as a safety measure, and although that may reduce the risk of shortage, and it also increase operational expense because companies need larger warehouse, more storage capacity, and more financial resources tied up in inventory. This demonstrates how one disruption in maritime trade can affect business operation globally. At the same time, exporters also face pressure from customers. If deliveries are delayed repeatedly, international clients may start losing confidence in suppliers. And in global commerce, reliability is extremely important. Companies don't only compete with the price, they also compete on speed, efficiency, the trust, the service, and in others. So when the routes become unstable, maintaining commercial relationships with some companies becomes much more difficult. Now, from the perspective of shipping companies like Hapag-Lloyd, the situation becomes even more complicated. Operating container ships is already expensive under normal conditions. These companies must constantly pay for fuel, for vessel maintenance, crews, container management, port service, and insurance. But because many ships are now taking longer alternative routes around Africa, operational costs increase dramatically. For example, longer voyages mean a higher fuel consumption. Crews spend more time at sea, and ships complete fewer trips per year, and companies may need additional vessels to maintain service frequently. And on top of that, insurance premiums also rise because vessels operating near conflict zones are considered higher risk. So financially, the pressure on shipping company becomes enormous. However, they also cannot simply stop operating completely. Global trade depends heavily on maritime transportation, and companies around the world still need the products, raw material, and industrial supplies. This means shipping companies must continue operating while constantly adapting to changing risk. And that is why logistics today is not only operational, it also strategic. Shipping companies now really heavily on real time risk analysis. International security updates, route optimization, and crisis management strategies. There are so many important for this company to make strategies to above all of the risk and the problematic that can have with the consequence of the conflicts. In other words, they are not only transporting containers anymore. They are managing uncertainty on a global scale. Another important aspect is the impact on freight rates. because the routes are longer and costs are higher. Shipping prices have increased significantly in some cases, and when freight costs increase, those increases eventually affect the final price of the products. For example, transporting electronics, machinery, clothing, or industrial materials from Asia to Europe now becomes more expensive than before. As a result, business may raise price to compensate for higher logistic expenses. And this is one of the reasons why international conflicts can contribute to inflation and in different countries. So it's not only in European countries or only in Africa. No, it's like in some countries of around the world. So even consumers who don't know nothing about maritime trade may still feel the consequence indirectly through the more expensive products or slow like deliveries and whatever. These crises also highlights how dependent globalization is on a few strategic maritime choke points. Places like the Suez Canal are essential for the global commerce because they allow ships to move efficiently between the countries. And this show how international countries or all the countries are interconnected to the modern economy truly.